All right, welcome back to Rob's Pizza Kitchen. Now we're going to go to phase 2, and that is to start mixing the flour. And remember how I already mentioned that we have a baker's percentage standard that I go by, and that allows you to have precise control of the ratio of your mixture between the flour, the water, hydration, salt, sugar, extra virgin olive oil, all those ingredients. When you have the same consistent ratio that works real well, you want to stick to that, and then any kind of minor alterations, you do one change at a time so we know what changed, what contributed to that change for the better or the worse, right? So here's a good example of my baker's percentage, and I'm going to try to get you to look at it here. You have overall ratio here, and then you have the water hydration. So this is like the actual amount of grams I have to put in that formula for the starter, for the flour, for the water, the oil, for the sugar, which is diastatic malt flour that I'm using, extra, all these things, salt. And then this is the total, and it shows the percentage, and it shows the hydration, dough hydration in the bottom. And so this guy, he's a professional baker. He's in the Netherlands, I believe, and his website's down here. He gives you free bread calculators to do your baker's percentage, and he has a great YouTube page. He's a food geek, so look up food geek, and he has videos on how to make a sourdough, how to manage your sourdough starter, and just how to, just in general baking questions. But he's been doing it for a long time. He simplifies it too. It's not as complicated as it sounds. And he explains how the baker's percentage is. He has one of those videos on his YouTube page. But he has a website here where you can access the bread calculator, where you could formulate. And he teaches you how to use this as well. He gives you a tutorial. So this is an excellent tool. And so this is what I've been using for a while. So this is the recipe that I'm doing. It's a New York style 16-inch. It'll be 2 of them. And in the comments here, I'm going to be targeting 2 567 grams dough balls. And then there'll be some left over to make a small 12-inch for my wife Christina. She likes pesto pizza, so there's some left over to make a dough ball for a pesto pizza, which is around 300 grams. Let me put this back in here. So that's what I use as a standard, and whenever I change it, I print out a new printout for that, and that's my guide for my ingredients, and it's precise in grams, so it's very detailed. And so here we go. So I'm going to start out with putting my sourdough starter first in the bowl. Now, if you don't have a mixer, that's okay. You could mix it by hand. Just make sure you have a large bowl that just covers a huge area. It's more messy, but if you don't have a mixer, you could just go right in it with your hands, like the way they've been doing it for thousands of years. And you could go ahead and mix it for a certain amount of time. It's going to be messy, but it'll still be great. And then you could knead it manually as well. What I usually do is I mix it for a certain amount of minutes, and then I knead it, and I have the the dough mixer goes to the kneading mode, where it's like level 2, and then I can go even higher just to speed up the process. So that does the kneading, but then I also finish it off manually on a cool surface, like on a stone surface, if you have that, or you can even buy portable ones. But that's very good for the dough to have a cool surface. So here we go. So this is the first ingredient I'm going to put in the bowl. So I have to put 452 grams of the sourdough starter. So I'm going to measure it on the mixing bowl. I'm going to measure it first, and then I'm going to do it. I've got some different things here. So here we go. I'm going to turn on my digital and put it in grams. I'm going to zero it out. A lot of times you got to zero it out so it doesn't. And then you put on your bowl, and then I'm going to zero it out again. Make sure it stays at 0, so it's not accounting for the bowl weight. So here we go. 452 grams of the sourdough starter. I'm watching the measurement as it increases, and I'll stop it when it gets to 452 in that range. It smells very good. You can smell the sourdough. I fed it this morning, so it's looking beautiful. Oh, I think we're there. Wow. Usually I don't get it that close, but whoops, did I just, yep, it's there. So these dough scrapers are good. Or I think they're spatulas. But yeah, I use these to for all kinds of purposes, to clear it out into the dough mixer bowl, and then when I'm done kneading, then I use it to get every nook and cranny when I finish the kneading process on the, just cleaning this up here. It's a sourdough starter, so I'll put this out of the way, be right back here. So now I got the sourdough starter. Let me angle the camera here so you could see. Okay, so I'm going to put it in the bowl first. It's kind of wet, so that's why I'm using this scraper here. Put everything in there. It's wet, totally wet. It's a wet starter. You know, and it takes some time. You know, the effort you put in, it's worth it. You know, it takes a while. I'm not in a hurry, and I used to be in a hurry all the time with food, but now I take time and I put love into it and put care into it, and it's, the rewards are much better when you do it the right way with high qualities. So, and of course, somebody's calling another number, probably spam. And I'm going to get some of the extra residual stuff out. Sometimes you have to account for spillage or just residual stuff you lose from wet dough when you're trying to move it over. But it's close enough. You get a knife to put the rest of this in here. Because if you don't get every nook and cranny, then you're not really going to get the whole 452 grams that I planned for in the baker's percentage. So I'm going to stick to what I targeted. All right, now I'm going to put the flour mixture. So right now the percentage calls for 616 grams of flour. So what I'm going to do is I put half of that initially, because now this sourdough starter is wet, so it's a wet pre-fermented dough, so it's 100% hydrated. So they account for, that's part of the formula. They account for half of that being the flour and half of that being the hydration source of water, if that makes sense. With the baker's percentage, you have to account for everything that you're putting in, because that contributes to the total desired weight of what you want to create. So I want to create two 16-inch dough balls that are 567 grams, and then I have a 300 grams left over to make the small 12-inch for the pesto. So that is my desired goal for those 3 pizza balls, and so I have to account for all those things that contribute to that desired weight, and that's what the baker's percentage is. So right now I'm going to I'll put half of the total flour that I'm going to put in initially. It's part of the mixing process. You don't put all of it in initially. You mix it with half of it, of the flour and the water. And you're just starting out with the yeast, water, and flour. You want to allow the gluten strands to develop with the flour. You don't want to put oil with water in the beginning. Oil will compete with the water, and it'll influence the hydration of the flour. So I put oil in it, and many professional bakers do this, and it's not the right way to do it. I mean, just in terms of hydration, if you want to hydrate the dough properly, you wait to put the oil towards the end as a coating, not as an initial hydration. It's not there to hydrate. It's there to give a nice coating to the dough. So initially, you want the water to hydrate the dough, and the yeast it'll all be combining in the gluten strands. You want to allow the gluten strands to develop. So let's go ahead and put flour, and I'm going to go ahead and measure that flour. So it's going to be 308, 309, so 308. So I'm going to clear this up. I zeroed it out, so now I'm going to wait until I get to 308. Trying to be precise here. Oh, a little bit more. Take some of this back in here. Okay, so this is 308, so I'm going to put it in the bowl. And there's extra residual here. I'm just trying to scrape it off. Okay, so this is the dough, or the flour. So now we're going to do the water. Okay, I'm back. I'm sorry. I had to find the water dispenser, so here we go. We're back. We're going to continue. So I'm going to put, so the water for this percentage calls for 328 grams. So I'm going to do half, which is 164 that I already calculated. Yep, 164. So let's do it. So 164. Oops, too much here. Went overboard. You want to be precise with your 164. Okay, that's close. And here's the water. All right, so that. Okay, so now we're going to start mixing. So I'm going to go ahead and attach. Well, actually, let me add the diastatic malt flour is important. That's a sugar, a natural enzymic sugar that helps browning. It's like a browning agent for the flour, for the exterior of the crust, and it also develops natural sugars and it just helps everything rise better as well. So it's very good. It's a good alternative. But you can use any dough. So I'm adding 15 grams of diastatic malt flour to this mixture. Oops, a little too much, so let's dip some of that in. Okay, it's 15. I'm mixing that in the bowl. Okay, so now we're going to get started with mixing. So I'm going to attach the dough hook here. Make sure it's fastened well where it doesn't come off. I'm going to secure it, and I'm going to... So all I added so far is the flour, the yeast, and the water, and I added a sugar, diastatic malt flour, a browning agent as well. So I'm not going to put the salt in the oil until later, towards the end of the process. So here we go. I'm going to start mixing. It's going to take a couple minutes, and here we go. So I usually look at it. It's not getting messy here. I look at it, and you see the dough forming a little bit. Let me see if I can move it closer. You see it forming a little bit here. So I look at it. I don't even time it anymore. I've done it so many times. When it starts to form and most of that flour is just linking together, connecting together. When it starts to look like, see, now you're starting to see it form a little bit. You see that? Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and stop. And I'm going to add more. Add more of the flour and the water. See, it's formed a little bit in the mixing stage, which is the beginning. So now I'm going to add the rest of the flour and water. So we're going to add more of so that's 308 grams of flour. You know, some people online, they'll go, oh, okay, you just put half of the bag and put the other half. No, that's volume. You want to be precise. That's the way they do it. Artisan bakers do it. That's the standard. And when you're precise, then you'll usually be consistent with the quality of what you're trying to make. And that's the key. Okay, so I'm going to put this in here. Whoops, some residual stuff that came off. And then I'm going to add the water, the rest of the water, which was 164 grams. Oh, wow, it hit it. Bullseye. Okay. Let it drip a little. All right, so this is the rest of the mixture in terms of flour, water, and yeast, and the diastatic malt flour, which is like your sugar. All right, so I'm going to put it in here. I'll put this cap cover so it doesn't cause a mess. It shouldn't, but you never know. So I'm gonna have you look at it. No! Alright, it's Lola, no. Okay, we're mixing the rest of it. You see it forming more. It's grabbing the rest of the flour. So I want everything to link up, all the gluten strands. Wait for it to form a little more. And the bottom, I don't know if you can't really see the bottom of the bowl, but yeah, I'm waiting for the bottom to also connect to the point where you see most of it forming. Okay, so that's good enough for now. So this is what I'm going to do, and this is not what typical people do, but people in the artisan baking industry, they do this method to allow the gluten strands to form better, and that is, now it basically formed, as far as the mixing stage, it formed the water, yeast, and flour. So at this point, I want to give it a break, and what this is called is, it's called a Autolyse. Whoops. It's called an Autolyse method, Auto, L-Y-S-E, and you can look that up on the baker from the Netherlands. He has, he explains that method very thoroughly in his YouTube page. He's Food Geek, and then the website is, I shared the website earlier, or you could just you could search on YouTube or Google what Autolyse is. You could find it on the King Arthur flour webpage on Autolyse. So it's a method where you allow the flour, the water, the yeast, the sugar, everything to just connect properly, and you allow the flour to hydrate and the gluten strands to connect with the yeast, and you give that opportunity to properly hydrate the dough. So I usually do this for a half hour. So I'm going to go ahead and take a break, and I'll see you soon. All right, bye.